Well, I think we have managed to get Josh Simons back on the line. He's Director of Labour Together. I hope we've got a better line for you, Josh. We're talking about, growth being the priority today. And you, as part of Labour, you'd agree with that?
Growth being the priority, yes. I'm sorry about my line. I cracked what I thought was quite a good joke, but alas, it got lost.
Oh, no, we want the joke. We want the joke.
Well, the moment's gone now. The moment's gone. I won't try and overdo it. But no, we absolutely agree with growth as the priority. The thing we disagree about is that tax cuts as the only way to achieve it is a serious approach to getting there. You know, we have tried that. We tried that with Liz Truss, and, it didn't work out so well. And the important point is that these so-called tax cuts are effectively paid for in public spending cuts, 3-4 years down the line. So they're sort of a bit of a myth because they're paying for these tax cuts up front with public spending cuts that are coming down the line that will be detrimental to growth in the long term. Right,
OK. And those spending cuts that you're seeing coming down the line, again, that's assuming the Tories are in power in a year's time. What do you think those cuts are going to be that are going to be detrimental to growth?
Well, the Resolution Foundation, the Institute for Government, the Institute for Fiscal Studies, these are not Labour think tanks, and they're all saying the same thing, which is that the money that's paying for these tax cuts is in effect just a bit of a myth. It's not really real money. And what that would mean is that were the Conservatives to win the next election and then have to, in fact, impose these spending cuts, the Resolution Foundation described the budget for the Department for Education, for the Department for Health, as implausible. Right. So is it really the case
the Resolution Foundation is definitely a left-wing think tank. IFS is not. But the key thing isn't the real, actually, the illusion is that there is any money for the government to give to anybody. By the way, it's their own money they're getting back. Because actually, taxes have risen so much that even any tax cuts announced today are actually, we're still going to be paying more tax than we were just a few years ago. But B, actually, the government doesn't have any money. We are massively in debt. We need to pay down the national debt. We're spending more on servicing the debt every year than we're paying even on educating our children. I mean, that is an insanity. No country is going to do well with those sort of numbers. I mean, the reality is, what would Labour do any differently?
That's exactly the bleak and difficult situation we are in. I know it's a party political line, but after 13 years of Conservative governments, we can't shy away from that. The crucial thing that Labour would do differently is invest. What this budget is going to do, again, is take out of the capital budget, the budget that the government spends on building your roads, improving your rails, sorting out your bus services. They've taken out of that budget to pay for short-term tax cuts. Labour would not do that because we think investing, just like getting a mortgage to buy a house, is different to day-to-day spending. So we wouldn't be spending more on day-to-day spending. What Labour would absolutely do is be investing in Britain, because Britain
But what does that mean? The last time Labour in power, Labour and under Gordon Brown and Tony Blair, they did loads of investment in terms of schools and hospitals, other public buildings. They did it with private finance initiative. Loads of hospitals basically are bankrupt now because they're paying 2, 3, 4 times the cost of that building work because it was really clever. It got it off the books for the Chancellor at the time, but actually ended up costing way more. Really inefficient way for government to carry out its spending. Oh, but we invested in lots of new hospitals. I mean, there are ways of doing this. When you say investment, I mean, that word investment is used an awful lot of time when actually what people really mean is current expenditure.
Well, I think there is a really fundamental difference, actually, between investment and current expenditure. But just to go back to where you started, it is true that Labour invested in hospitals, in schools, and it is also true that under the last Labour government, GDP growth was about 1.5 percentage points higher than it has been under this Conservative government. Those two things are related. Investing in public services, for instance, health, that get people back into work so they're not working because they're sitting on waiting lists waiting for an operation, is good for our economy. And the whole point that Rachel Reeves has laid out is that we would only invest if the OBR thinks it's likely to boost growth, and therefore our debt is falling as a share of GDP by the end of the Parliament. That is the crucial principle upon which Labour would judge its own investment plan.
OK. I always find it strange when Labour is saying, look, we had much higher growth. Weren't things a lot better under us? Labour ended with that crash across the world, but hugely hitting Britain because of our sort of large reliance on the financial services industry. The banking crash devastated our national finances it's still affecting us now. Whoever was in charge for the first 5-10 years after that was going to see those issues. We would have had austerity under any sensible government at that time, and you know that as well as I do. Then we've seen why are we in the mess we're in right now? Now, I can disagree with a lot of the things that have been done under various Conservative governments in the last 13 years, but at the end of the day, the crisis we're in our public finances right now is down to two main things. It is down to pandemic and lockdown policy and furlough. Labour called for longer lockdowns, more lockdowns, deeper lockdowns, and more money to be spent. We would be in a worse state right now if Labour had been in charge to all of that. We are down to massive energy hikes as a result of the Ukraine war and those Russian sanctions. And again, Labour has backed all of that. So a lot of the things that Labour can criticise the Tories for, and again, we all criticise the Tories for, would have happened under anyone's watch.
Well, I'm afraid you would expect me to say this, Julia, but I dispute both bits of that.
There wouldn't have been a Ukraine war, and we wouldn't have had lockdown. Really?
Of course that's true. Of course that's true. There would have been a Ukraine war, and we would have had a lockdown.
So
the crucial point, though, is that this country was vulnerable to those shocks in a way that other countries weren't. The United States, Germany, did not deal with the 2008 financial crisis in the same way that we did, and now that families in America, working class families in America, working class families in Germany are paying less for their basic goods and services because inflation is lower in those countries. So despite whatever Rishi Sunak says about halving inflation, British working families are still paying more for their basic goods.
Our economy is more reliant on services. Germany is more reliant on manufacturing. US is a net oil exporter and gas exporter. That's why they're doing better. Right, that's nothing to do with any policy that would have been brought in by the Labour Party. It's nonsense.
Well, we could have a completely different energy mix.
Oh, well, if Labour were in charge, we'd definitely have a big energy mix. We'd have blackouts most evenings.
That's just, complete
really?
supposition. Yes,
it's not. No, really. It's not. It's based on Labour Party policy to go towards net zero, even sooner than 2050. To have no fossil fuel use, really? Really? I mean, this is insane. Labour's policies are insane.
That Lord David Cameron, as I now apparently should call him, one of the things he did was cut the budget for investing in our nuclear capacity. And our nuclear capacity is exactly the form of capacity that would have insulated us from the shocks caused by the war in Ukraine. So the assertion that there is no link between Conservative policies and higher energy bills now is just not true.
Tell me how many nuclear power stations the last Labour government built.
The last Labour government, in my opinion, made a mistake in not investing more in nuclear.
They did, exactly. A plague on all your houses.
I agree with that.
A plague on all your houses. Josh, I'm so glad we got you back on the line, Josh Simons. Hope you come on again. Director of Labour Together.